Assalamu alaikum. You hearing? I could just probably. Nafisa. Yeah, Riza, just move out that chair from the corner and put it somewhere else. Yeah. Doesn't look good in the photographs. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is the volume getting out enough in the back? Are you all hearing clearly? Are you hearing clearly? The sound, yes? Okay. Sabrina? Okay. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulihil Kareem. Let me welcome all of you this morning again as one of the organizers. We're seeing some new faces this morning, and also we also have some friends with us who have been invited to this session. It is very important for us to really start with what the Quran says. And this session treats with looking at creating spaces for women in the work. And one of the presenters actually came in and noticed, she said, well, this topic is about creating spaces. Where are the women? So we're going to probably address all of that. We have three vibrant, progressive sisters here who are going to speak for about 5 to 10 minutes each, and then we would really like this to be engaging. We haven't really had a lot of engagement, I think, and we'd really like to have a discussion on the issues. So let's start, as we always should, from the Quran. What does Allah say about men and women? And we all know the story about the episode where Salama asked the Prophet ﷺ, why does the Quran not speak of women as it did of men? Of course, we know the Quran addresses mankind and addresses men and women together, but in terms of being specific, and in the interest of time, I wouldn't go through the entire ayah, but the verses that speak about believing men and believing women, women who are obedient, men who are obedient, those who are patient, etc. Allah has prepared a great reward for them. And very important as well, and we alluded to some of this yesterday when we were talking about gender equality. The Quran, Allah tells us very clearly, never will I allow to be lost the work of any of you, and He stresses male or female. If we go to the next quick slide. The next, yes. In the Quran and from the Sunnah, we know that men and women are equal. We complement each other. And I listened very carefully to Brother Dawood yesterday, speaking about the challenges that the early brothers had without having spouses. And because Allah has made men and women to provide comfort to each other. And when we read about the verses about marriage and about, closeness, it's about providing peace and serenity and sakina. We hear that word sakina, which is contentment and the kind of bliss that you have. And therefore we complement each other. Important though, equality does not mean sameness. 2 and 2 is 4, but 3 and 1 is also 4. We do not have to become men, and men don't have to become women to be equal. We are equal but different. Each individual has unique talents, abilities, responsibilities, resources, wealth, etc. And we'll be questioned as to how we use those, women as well as men. Women in Islam, I think, are in the best position as we have the flexibility to participate based on the needs and requirements of our society. We are not forced to work, so we don't have to do like many single women in the region where we have to go to a fast food outlet and work shift and to be able to bring money home on the table. Our husbands, our spouses, our male relatives, our fathers, are responsible for taking care of us. So like I said, what's mine is mine, sorry, but what's my husband's is ours, right? So we have the best of both worlds. In fact, when I said that once to some colleagues at work, they said, that's true, I want to be a Muslim. Because a Muslim woman, her resources are hers. She does not have to contribute any of it to anything, in terms of the upkeep and so on. So we really, have the best of both worlds. Islam is the middle way, and that's important. And, in reading the Quran very frequently, especially during the last month of Ramadan, that whole concept of moderation, of the middle way. And tonight we're going to talk about extremism. That is so very important for us to understand. It's the natural way, the pragmatic, practical, the best way. And women as well were encouraged, and if you read the Seerah and we look at the history of Islam, they were encouraged to respond appropriately to the needs of the community. And that's very important, because we don't have to do the same thing as brothers do, but we need to respond appropriately based on our resources, based on our circumstances. For instance, you may have a young mother who may have to look after a baby, and at that time, the baby's needs are more important. I've seen women slapping children and babies in the masjid to pray because they want to go and join the prayer, and not understanding that the child's needs, if the child is hungry and needs to be breastfed at that point. So it's really about each of us responding appropriately to the needs, to the conditions, and to the needs. And very important, the last thing I'd say before I introduce the first speaker is that Islam is a meritocracy. It is based on merit. It is not based on gender considerations. It's not based on social status. It is not based on ethnicity. The Prophet ﷺ, in developing, the first society, the first ummah, looked at merit, even when he had to go outside to non-Muslims for expertise. And therefore, he looked to women as well. There were women who transformed societies, women who made valuable contributions to society. And it's about competence and merit. So it's not because you're a woman or a man, it's about what your value is and and it's about the merit and what you bring to the work. And I think that's an important point for us to recognize. And I just wanted to put these things, on the table before we begin our discussions, because I think we need to ensure that we are clear with some of the basics before we move on. I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker, Aria Jamila Geyser, and she was telling me only this last week that her mother, who is not yet Muslim, who is in the audience here with us, a very lovely lady, actually realized that she probably was going to become Muslim. Aria just accepted Islam about a year ago, Aria? Just about a year ago, and she said, my mother named me Jamila, not knowing, that what would have happened, but she said in Allah's wisdom that happened. She's a Swiss Trinidadian revert to Islam. She was born in Italy, raised in Trinidad and Tobago, and educated in the United States, so she's a global citizen. After having graduated from New York City's Columbia University in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in human rights and a specialization in psychology, she returned home and is now working for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees as a protection assistant. She is fluent in English and Italian and proficient in Spanish and French. Amongst her goals are to learn as much as she can about the Deen of Islam and to become a scholar, inshallah. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce you to Sister Aria, who is going to kick off the discussion. She's very passionate, so please ask all these ladies here, these sisters are very passionate, so we're just going to, allow them to express themselves, and then we can have the discussion, inshallah. Sister Aria.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. And a special thank you to Sister Sharifa for that very warm introduction. Jazakallahu khair. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. I begin my speech in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Rahman, our Rahim, the most merciful. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be speaking here today. And for anyone who has ever been on this side of the room, you know that being the bearer of such privilege carries with it some responsibility and even a dash of pressure. So I ask your forgiveness ahead of time, inshallah, if my nerves betray me today and I stumble over my words. Let me start by sharing a bit about my background. I promise there's a point to this other than just being a trip down memory lane. The values that stood out most to me from my childhood were three. Number one, education. My mother was relentless in her pursuits to get me to read. She always said that whatever I have up here, no one can take away. And she always told me that it's not okay to just not know something and leave it at that. Go and find someone who does know. Ask them. Seek knowledge. Question things. Contemplate the answers. Ponder over them. Think critically. Second value, knowing that I was not better than anyone because of my name, complexion, or opportunities. And also knowing that other people weren't better than me because of these things, or other things like money, gender, or class. It was knowing that our inherent value as human beings was equal. What separated us was how good your heart was. And lastly, and this value came especially from my dad, we are not living on planet X, he used to say, separate from the rest of humankind. Therefore, we cannot turn a blind eye to their suffering. We have a profound moral obligation to take care of our fellow human beings and aid in the alleviation of their suffering, simply by virtue of our shared humanity. Pretty Islamic values, wouldn't you say? And that was the allure of Islam to me. This is a religion which establishes these notions among its foundational principles. Yet, as I quickly came to realize, the behavior of Muslims does not always match up to the standards of the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I was asked to speak here today specifically about creating safe spaces for women in the social sphere. Immediately, what comes to mind is an environment in which women can have the necessary support to grow to our fullest potential and to be unapologetically Muslim, where we can also contribute our skills and intellect, and then have those skills actually taken into consideration and valued. Admittedly, the social sphere is extremely vast. So while contemplating on how to address this in a manner that is equally expansive in its application, it occurred to me that a way to start changing these spaces and making them safer for women was to change the quality of the conversation that we have about women's issues. Firstly, I would like to draw from my most profound childhood lesson, which is the emphasis my mother put on reading and seeking knowledge and education. Egyptian philosopher Qasim Amin wrote the following regarding the status of women in Egypt, but I think that this is universally applicable. Eventually, the qualities of the woman become the characteristics of the family and are extended to the country. Thus, a good mother is more useful to her species than a good man, while a corrupt mother is more harmful than a corrupt man. The evidence of history confirms and demonstrates that the status of women is inseparably tied to the status of the nation. When the status of the nation is low, the status of women is also low. And when the status of the nation is elevated, the status of the women in that country is also elevated. And there's a certain wisdom to this, because the woman has been tasked with the responsibility of raising the next generations, ensuring that we are all well-adjusted, disciplined, tolerant, and productive members of society. But how is she to do that if she herself cannot engage with that society in an analytical and intellectual way? There is so much Islamic discourse around the idea that men and women are different. We are biologically different, psychologically different. We have different roles to fulfill. Bearing this in mind, we have to acknowledge that men and women will undoubtedly have different ways of thinking and different perspectives to contribute. Why then isn't there a more balanced ratio of scholarly perspectives in the mainstream? I would like to see more programs streamlining women towards Islamic scholarship, more women at the highest rings of scholarly circles, and more women in Islamic councils. I think it would be beneficial to also have women talk about other things apart from just women's issues like tahara, menstruation, and ghusl. Of course, these issues are important, and we as women are the experts on those matters, but we have so much more to offer in addition to that. We have so much more to say. We are enhancing fields of science and technology, economics, medicine, philosophy, literature, education, the environment, and anything else that is asked of us. The second safe space I would advocate for is the need for a space of Islamic solidarity, whereby Muslims have the support of our brothers and sisters to grow at our own pace within the framework of Islam. A space where when she makes mistakes, the community embraces her with mercy, encouragement, forgiveness, and love, knowing fully well that this is how we hope to be embraced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think this space can be achieved by focusing on my second childhood lesson, which taught me that a person's inherent value isn't measured by outward factors, but rather by the quality of goodness or piety in their heart. I want to highlight this using the example of hijab. Unlike the brothers, we wear our religion as a visible aspect of our identity. And while yes, Muslim men have identifiable markers as well, such as the beard, a beard is not inextricably linked to Islam the way the hijab is. As Muslims, women and men, we are all ambassadors of our religion, and we all know this. However, when a sister steps out of the house wearing her hijab, the rest of the world knows it too. And they will layer onto us their prejudices, biases, opinions, phobias, and whatever else there is. So we are vulnerable in ways that the brothers are not. We have the eyes of strangers on us in the ways that the brothers do not. Therefore, everything we do, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is associated with Islam. And in a world that can be pretty hostile towards Muslims, this experience, with all of its struggles and pressures, is quite unique to women. We begin all but one chapter of the Quran in the name of the Most Merciful. Yet there is a very, dare I say, unmerciful narrative that swarms the social spheres about women who don't wear hijab being the equivalent of dirty, uncovered lollipops surrounded by flies. So for anyone who's confused as to what I'm talking about, let me share with you what we're often told. Imagine you have a choice between two candies. One is in its wrapper and one isn't. They both fall and get covered with dirt and flies. They both fall and one gets covered with dirt and flies, while the other is protected because of the wrapper. You are then asked to select which one you want. Obviously, anybody forced to make this choice would choose the one that is still wrapped. But this analogy is problematic for many reasons, because if the women are the candy and the hijab is the wrapper, then who are the flies in the dirt? It would logically follow that it would be the men. But I don't believe that men are dirt any more than I believe that women are candy. Yet this very dehumanizing and hurtful rhetoric is extremely popular. I'm not by any means saying that hijab is not important. It's a Quranic commandment after all. But consider that the verses regarding hijab came down closer towards the end of the period of revelation, meaning that while covering is very important, it is still secondary to other concepts. The earliest verses were calls to Tawheed, and the first verse ever was the command to read, to seek knowledge, to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that we may come to love Him. For anyone who has ever been in love, you know that you go above and beyond to please your loved ones. And that is what the hijab is to a Muslimah. It is one of many acts of obedience to Allah. It is something we do knowing that this act would please Him. It is an outward manifestation of our love for our Creator, an indication of our taqwa, but not the essence of it. It may well be that someone who does not cover may be a hafiza, for example, or her other efforts to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may make her more beloved to our Lord than someone like myself, for example, who does cover. We never know. So as my second most profound childhood lesson taught me, we cannot judge a person's value based on what we can perceive through our senses, because our true value is in our taqwa, which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see. And in conclusion, I would just like to reiterate my third most profound childhood lesson about being in the service to others. In the words of my dad, we are not living on planet X, far removed from the struggles of the rest of humanity. And in even better words, as the English interpretation of Surah Al-A'raf, Ayah 56 says, "And cause not corruption upon the earth after its reformation, and invoke Him in fear and aspiration. Indeed, the mercy of Allah is near to the doers of good." Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
I was just wondering whether takbirs were reserved for men only. I was just wondering whether takbirs were reserved for men only. Allahu Akbar. Thank you. Jazakallah khairan. Arya's dad was actually the head of the UNDP in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Hans Geiser, some of you would have known. And when he passed away, not too long ago, she shared with me that she was trying to come to terms with his death, and she found Islam searching to intellectually try to understand death and the hereafter, and found that Islam provided the best explanation. So her search to Islam has been an intellectual one. Arya, that was excellent. Our next speaker is also a global citizen. She was originally born in Trinidad and Tobago, but spent a number of years in America, Canada, the Middle East, and Portugal. She's actually a scholarship winner, having been awarded a Cape National Business Scholarship in 2012 graduated with an honors degree in economics with a minor in finance. In 2014, she completed her first master's, a master's in economics, at the University of the West Indies here in St. Augustine. Upon completion in that same year, she was awarded a full European scholarship to pursue a second master's degree. This one is in finance, and it was done in Portugal at the University of Porto. She is currently working at the Economic Development Advisory Board as a research and policy analyst, and that's a very high-profile, high-level economic. In fact, it is the economic policy board that advises the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. We're very pleased to have Sister Dahlia with us this morning, Dahlia Headley. And her mother is also in the audience, and I know when my mother is in the audience, you can see the beams and pride and so on. Thank you very much for bringing up, Dahlia in the way she has. I only met her a week ago at a social event, and I said, I need you in this program. So Sister Dahlia, please.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Initially, when I heard of the session titled Creating Spaces for Women, I became ecstatic and was really eager to participate. A number of ideas and issues came rushing through my mind all at once. Because there's so much to be said with regards to women, particularly Muslim women, and the various issues we face living in the Caribbean. Within the broader topic, creating space for women, today I think is the ideal platform to discuss the importance of creating a space for intellectual discussion for Muslim women in our communities. By such an undertaking, we get the opportunity to understand how the creation of this space could assist, and by so doing, paves the way for establishing varied forums to address the particular issues affecting our community. The role of women in society has changed significantly over centuries and continues to change. Our position has become diverse with shifting social, economic, and political circumstances. However, but these changes bring to the forefront new issues that need to be addressed and would only be dealt with provided a space or avenue is created which allows for a cross-section of independent thinkers, entrepreneurs, professionals, housewives, single mothers, and students to engage in stimulating dialogue to address these prevailing issues that our Muslim community continue to face. Women comprise of more than half of the population of the world. We are the foundation of society and the first teachers of any generation. Yet, Muslim women, particularly in the Caribbean, continue to appear as a mass of silent individuals. Every year, we have an increasing number of qualified women ranging from different academic backgrounds. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have Olivers, psychologists, teachers, analysts, and engineers. You name it, we have it. Yet, Muslim women in the Caribbean are still largely absent from local and national decision-making bodies. What are we as women doing to strengthen our community? What are we as a community doing to address the challenges that are so prevalent in our Muslim community? I'm looking here at the crowd today. I was actually the Sister Sharifa was speaking about. And I said, this is a session for creating spaces for Muslim women, but where are the women? You know, I'm seeing that it's heavily, a lot of males are here, which is good, but where are the sisters? There are members in our communities that are victims of horrid domestic abuse and continue to suffer silently. Members in our community with mental health issues. There are rape victims that need support. There's a case of single parents needing support. There's the issue of drug abuse, Muslims incarceration. We have born Muslims struggling with identity issues. We have pockets of convicts suffering from isolation. We have discrimination, and the list goes on and on. We Muslim women have a wealth of knowledge and skills right here in our local communities. However, we can only transform our skills and knowledge to address our pressing needs in society, provided that we firstly recognize and acknowledge the importance for creating, establishing a space for engagement to shape a more promising and brighter future for our daughters, sisters, mothers, community, and society at large. So we need to become more attuned, more vocal, and more proactive. We basically need to get more involved in decision making and the whole planning process. We need a seat at the table that has traditionally been predominantly dominated by male figures. As a Muslim woman, I am proud of my faith, but I can't overlook the damage that has been done in the name of religion. The misrepresentation, misuse, and manipulation of religious scripture have influenced our social and cultural norms, our daily lives, to such an extent that sometimes I think many of us do not realize the impact it has on the Muslim community, particularly Muslim women. Oftentimes, I find myself in conversation questioning my own role in society, my own dreams and aspirations. And even with the foundation my parents have provided for me, I still find myself at times questioning the role of women in Islam. Once you do your research, however, you immediately find women in Islam who are leaders, who are innovators, who are strong politically, economically, even militarily. Lady Khadija radiallahu anha financed the Islamic movement in its infancy. We wouldn't be here if it was not for her contribution. In the modern day, our economic system, legal and religious institutions are changing and would continue to change. Women's involvement and participation is more than vital in today's society. It's imperative. The tools of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers are no longer sufficient. As with each generation, there are new challenges and concerns arising. Today's world is changing at an accelerated rate, unlike anything past generations have witnessed. The world currently is a global playing field to speak. Families are structured and function differently, traditional values are being challenged, and our overall sense of community, unfortunately, is slowly disappearing. The creation of space for Muslim women for intellectual discussion is pivotal. The inclusivity of women have become crucial. A space to connect, collaborate, communicate, decide, and empathize is essential as it promotes holistic and effective decision-making and planning. It aims to provide a platform for thinkers, visionaries, and intellectuals to gain a better understanding of the biggest issues facing our local communities, and fosters a desire to help create a brighter future. And until we can have an avenue or space to even engage in dialogue and critical thinking to make a difference, to address our issues, or in order to significantly contribute to our Muslim communities and society, we cannot expect to have meaningful participation in decision-making and processes that affect us, our families, and communities. With the unveiling of the computer age, a renaissance was born. So too should our approach mechanisms. So what do we do from here? We create a space for Muslim women to learn, to contemplate, to voice, and to question. We invite and encourage our local alamas right here in the community to speak at religious gatherings, establish a ladies' learning circle, endorse female-led conferences and seminars that allows for engaging discussions. I, for one, personally think TED Talk is an example of an ideal platform. We should have retreats and camps for sisters and create online forums as a means of facilitating intellectual discussion. With these initiatives, I'm hopeful that with the combined efforts of members of society, a path forward can be paved towards rectifying the issues affecting our local communities. Last but not least, amidst all of the ongoing changes within society, we must always ensure that every thought, every approach, and every decision towards the creation of this space is consistently in alignment with our spiritual values. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. I was just waiting to see if you all are quick learners or slow learners. But from the statistics of the University of the West Indies, and I have some quick facts, I'll share it with you electronically. It will take too much time. We'll probably try to get it up. In 2012, that's the latest statistics they have, 2012, 2013, of the 4,089 degrees awarded, 2,762, Riza, went to women. Of the over 4,000 degrees awarded, close to 3,000 went to women, University of the West Indies, that's all the campuses, Mona, St. Augustine, and Cave Hill, and just over 1,000 went to males. In terms of enrollment, engineering, you still had males dominating, but not by much. We had 1,600 males, 1,000 females enrolling. Humanities, 2,000 something, which is not, unusual. Law, 238 females, 91 males. Medical sciences, 1,715 females, 815 males. Science and technology, 1,615 females, 1,300 males. Social sciences, 4,561 females, 1,887 males. And the statistics are not very different for the Muslim community, because our Muslim sisters are doing very well and surpassing our brothers. So, to have a discussion about finding intellectual space for women and the scholarship, and in fact the presentation that's up there, I'll probably share it with you, although we don't have time in this conference, or maybe at the education conference, dealt with female scholars of Islam, from the work, Al-Muhaddithat, which dealt with scholarship and looked at the contribution of women. So I think these statistics really should inform the kind of work we're doing, and in fact to find the spaces, because We do have the women who are graduating, much more women are graduating, and what do we do? Somebody jokingly was telling me recently, well, we have too many bright women and too many women are graduates and they are professionals, so we need to find a way to pull down the women and keep them down, to fix the problem. That's not the solution. We need to get the men, because we talked about complementing, we need to get the men to up their game and to be able to see what is causing the underperformance of males. See Brother Aliasa, my sheikh, walked in there, he's smiling there. We did a conference a couple of years ago at the university on male underperformance. And we were trying to understand the factors as to why boys and men were not performing as great as they should. So that's it in terms of some of the statistics and facts. One of my heartaches really is that the same battles that some of maybe our mothers fought, and the battles that I would have fought, my own daughters are still fighting it. And we should learn from one generation to the next. We have a brilliant sister here who's graduating in economics and finance. I don't know if the MC has changed its position about women serving on its board and so on. I know we have some MCU new reps here. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but these are the kinds of, when we talked about merit at the start and competence, if we have Islamic financial institutions that are fledgling, we need to be able to access volunteers and resources. So I would think that you would approach, people like Sister Dahlia and so on to be able to help with the Islamic Credit Union. So I know that's a sore point. In talking about that as well, our last speaker is going to talk about the erosion of some of our rights and some of the spaces, physically, literally, and otherwise. And as I said, we have made progress, but over the last few years, we've seen, not only with women issues and so on, but I think we've seen some leadership crises within the community, and whilst we have more people who are practicing, when we look at the difference between the form and the substance, there's a big dichotomy. And when we look at what is happening in terms of the rights of women and participation, we're seeing some pushback. Sister Nafisa is going to talk a little bit about that and to give us a real example as to an issue that we have to treat with to avoid that from happening. Because if we do not have strong institutions and we do not have sustainability built in our work, we're going to be going around in circles and we are not going to grow, we are not going to advance. In the next 10 years, we might be talking about the same thing again. And my grandchildren then, I might have to be fighting for the rights of my grandchildren. So we're hoping to not do that. Sister Nafisa needs no introduction to Trini's. She's an attorney at law, legal advisor, former senator, former deputy political leader, legal consultant, Ministry of the Attorney General, Children's Authority, former chairman of the Samuel Laventille Regional Corporation, and she told me, make sure and don't say former friend, because she's deserted me a little bit. So she's former everything. This is our politician in the midst here, so we're going to get some of the politics. So she's not my former friend, she's my good friend still, Nafisa.
Thank you very much, my former boss. Thank you very much, my former boss. My very respected elders, sisters and brothers in Islam and in humanity, Assalamu alaikum. And to our visitors from throughout the region, welcome to Trinidad and Tobago. And I stand here this morning and I want to take the opportunity at the outset to thank Sharifa for inviting me to participate in this very, very, very significant forum here at the Trinidad Muslim League. In our country, when you look at our landscape, we probably have more than 100 masjids throughout the island in Trinidad, and of course one in Tobago, or maybe two in Tobago. And I'm indeed very heartened to see the president of the Tobago masjid here. And we are at the Trinidad Muslim League compound. This masjid has always been described as the most beautiful masjid in our island. But where I come from, just up the road, as you're heading into Port of Spain, there is an area called El Socorro Road. And on the El Socorro Road, there is what used to be perhaps the largest masjid in the island, known as the Nure Islam Masjid. I see our dear brother Nasser Mustafa sitting in the back. Nasser Mustafa has his roots in my area where I come from. And he would know and understand some of what I want to share with you here this morning. As I came in this hallway I saw my primary school teacher, Mr. Kalim, and I saw my secondary school teacher in economics, Mr. Wajid Malik. And you know, when you see your teachers, it does take you back a long, long way. When I listened to Sister Aria as she was speaking, I got the name right? Yes. I knew her dad. I worked with her dad for a period of time. At least we participated in some fora together. And as I listened, you know, she talked about education. And I want to go back to my days as a young girl growing up in the El Socorro community, because we all belong to a Jamaat in some part of the region. And there are lessons for us to learn in what we are doing. And as I stand here today, it's with a lot of emotions, because my own mother, who has been a stalwart foundation member of the San Juan Muslim Ladies Organization, which was founded in the year 1959 and which continues to exist. These days, she's not as strong as she used to be. But you know, you have to look back. And you have to learn lessons from the past and realize, as Sharifa talked about grandchildren and so, that the baton has been passed on, or it is being passed on, and we have to press on, because it continues to be a struggle for us in our respective Jamaats. I have in my possession here a document, a newsletter. The other day, I was able to go through some very treasured documents in my family's home, and I came across a file. I have some notes in my late father's own handwriting, and for people who knew him, he had served as the vice chairman of the Nure Islam Mosque Board for a number of years. And as we are talking about spaces for women, we don't have to go very far. Let us look right here in our Jamaats, in our masjids, and let us talk about the spaces for women. It's a very, very burning issue for us in the El Socorro community as women, because I just happen to have grown up in the midst of all kinds of confusion. In the mosque, in the politics, you name it. So that after all of this, you know, at my age now, I'm able to look back and at least share some experiences so that we can move forward based on lessons learned. In 1980, listen to some of the literature that was being circulated and quoted in our community. And these are some extracts for those of you who have access. I'm saying this not in any way to attack any organization or anything, but these are real things that happen. Those of you in your libraries, you may even have some of these books. There's a book called Fatwa Rahimiyya, and these are some extracts, volume 1. It is published by Maktaba Rahimiyya, Randa, Surat, India, printed by S.K. Gupta, Wellprint, Delhi, India. One of these extracts, and I think I may have been 16 or 17 or 18 thereabouts, when these things were being thrown in our faces in our Jamaat. A girl should know only so much English as to be able to write her husband's address, thereby not having to go to a stranger to ask. Number 2, it is not permissible to send girls to schools and colleges for acquiring higher education. Thank Allah, Mr. Wajid Malik was teaching me economics in those days at St. Joseph Convent in Port of Spain, one of the finest schools in this country. Admission of paralysis to their bodies is better than admission to college. Page 22. It is a million times better to be useless and remain in Orthodox Islamic schools than be busy in learning English. Page 18.
Stop, please.
The use of loudspeakers for worship is not fit and proper. Page 76. They used to say that's a bid'ah. Number 6, another extract. Women's coming to the mosque is abominable, whether it is for the sake of 5 times prayers or for Friday and Eid services or for attending a preacher's lecture. Page 131. And it goes on. My dear sisters and brothers, forgive me if I sound a little loud in my tone, but you know, there are some things, it's just the extent of the emotions that are evoked when you go back in times. Some years after this battle was being fought in our masjid, and I'm sharing this because we have lessons to be learned from this. We all know that it was in 1973 when the great world the oil crisis took place and the price of oil skyrocketed and certain countries in the Middle East became so wealthy that they started to pump their money in the Western world. We are in Trinidad and Tobago, we are part of the Western world. And many of our Jamaats and organizations have been recipients of funding from some of these great institutions in the Middle East and elsewhere. And we started to experience a change in our practices, in our traditions, and even in our ideologies, so that with the spread of what we now know to be Islamic fundamentalism, you now have in our country, and I have seen literature that describes it basically as where in Trinidad and Tobago we have traditional Muslims and fundamentalist Muslims. All right, the scholars have gone into this, they have traced it, the evolution of the Muslim community. But in those early days, that Nur Islam Masjid, which has a very, very special history in the El Socorro community, it used to be part of the El Socorro plantation. And in 1904, a particular family had bought 2 lots of land. And a wooden structure was constructed to be a masjid because we were part of the plantation system. So the Muslims in the community would come there to congregate and pray. In 1905, a member of the Muslim community bought those 2 plots of land. And over time, you had a Haji, a Qazi, a prominent Qazi who had come into the country. And then you had the emergence of organizations like the ASJA and the TIA in the 1930s. And when there was a split because of ideological differences, there was a court matter, and in 1949, you had the establishment of a trusteeship with respect to that property. And there was, by that time, a concrete structure that was the masjid in El Socorro. And as the years went by, some of the pioneers, many of whom you all would have known of in the community, the late N.M. Ghani, you had people like the late Kamaluddin Muhammad and others, Sheikh Hashim Muzaffar, and many other stalwarts from the Muslim community. They would have come together, and in the 1950s, there was established a Nur Islam Mosque Board, where the trustees appointed a certain number of persons from the congregation to be part of the decision-making process in the masjid. And during that time, there was a youth group that emerged called the Islamic Youth Movement in 1958. And of course, as men and boys, you can't do everything. If you want to raise a little funds, who will get up and fry the bara and cook the little food and make the stuff? And it's the sisters. So there emerged the San Juan Muslim Ladies Organization as a sister, to help in the mosque, amongst other things. But I can tell you that the collaboration that developed with the establishment of the Nur Islam Mosque Board, led to a constitution that recognized the role of women in the masjid. And so it provided that there must be 3 representatives from the San Juan Muslim ladies in the mosque board and 3 representatives from the youth group in the mosque board, together with those appointed by the trustees. And that is a formula that is actually a covenant in the deeds for that property. And that mosque board, through a number of fundraising activities, used to have activities where the masjid, on a regular basis, whether it's an Eid-dinner, whether it's a bazaar, whether it's a tea party, you name it, there was that coming together of the community that helped to reconstruct that mosque in 1966 to what it is as when you see that structure. And for a number of years, that was the decision-making process. And the women were part and parcel of everything. We even helped to acquire the property next door to be used as a playing ground for the youths. Women, young girls could go in the masjid and play lawn tennis, table tennis, you name it. So it wasn't only about Fry and Barra. But guess what? Fry and the Barra and the Kachori helped to raise so much money. Some of the finest caterers in our country are from our community. And they were people who passed through the San Juan Muslim Ladies Organization. I know my time is limited, but I have to tell you that in the 1970s, when the confusion started, because of differences in ideological, many other reasons, that mosque board actually, when the chairman resigned, the entire board resigned. And that was like making track for Guti to run on. Because that was when this kind of fatwa started to emerge in the masjid. And they tried to keep us out. They tried to keep us down as women. At one time when they moved the partition to restrict our space, and that masjid was built with a certain plan and logic, where upstairs was supposed to be exclusively for worship, and downstairs as a community center. There was a library, a hallway where you can have lectures, men on one side, women on one side. We had a beautiful kitchen where any activities we were having, if we had an Eid-dinner, right from there in that kitchen you can serve. We used to have cooking classes. And we all eat samosas today. You know where samosas came from in our community, in our country? It was through the San Juan Muslim Ladies Organization. A missionary Hafiz Memi, his wife Zuleka, was the one who taught our sisters in the ladies group how to make samosas. Today samosas is popular. And it is something that we had classes going on week after week in that masjid aimed at empowering women. You know how many courses, cake decorated, the sisal, make it. Women used to make clothes, make handbags, sell it, and generate an income in those glorious days when we had our space in the masjid. But when the confusion started to rage and they started to put pressure on us, eventually in 2000 they just demolished our kitchen. In the year, I know around 2000, I asked any of you men who are gathered here today, if you want to demolish your kitchen in your house, do you think you could just bring in somebody and demolish it? Will be put out of the house nowadays. As women, we were not consulted, we were not taken into account. They built a kitchen outside and we refused to use it up to today. And just recently, during the holy month of Ramadan, big refurbishment going on in our masjid. And we keep telling them, reconstitute a mosque board so that we as women will be able to have a voice in the decision-making process and restore our kitchen as an act of good faith. You know what they're doing now? They've gone to put an office space where our kitchen was. So we have to continue this battle and continue to struggle for our space as women in the El Socorro community. My time is up. I could go on and on, but that is a real case study for us to examine and learn lessons from it. Assalamu alaikum.
Indeed, Takbir. In fact, Nafisa can go on and on. She's an excellent speaker orator and comes from a family of great orators. That's the only way to explain it. Great oral history. That family from Mohammedville. So So I had to give her a wind up, otherwise we would have been here. We have another session and we do want to engage in a bit of discussion. But just 3 quick points. Only this morning I had the TV on, and controversial figure Imran Nazar Hussain was speaking. I was exercising while I was listening to him, and he was talking about the international monetary system and people making haram what Allah has made halal. And in listening to Nafisa and the other speakers, we have to be very careful. In fact, when Nafisa was reading from that barbaric, outdated document, you just kept thinking, Allah in the Quran is so very clear, and Allah has made these things halal, has made it permissible for women to do all these things, and people, men, maybe some other women as well, have made their own rules. And he was saying it's akin to shirk. I mean, I wouldn't go there, but we need to be very careful about taking away rights. And the erosion of rights is an important thing that we need to look at. But Nafisa, what I'll probably tell you is to make hijrah, Gil. Some of us had to make hijrah from bamboo and so on, When we left, Purdas went up and, you had erosions of rights. Some people trying to make places that are sisters friendly and spaces that are like that, and you're called too liberal and so forth. And unfortunately, the sad thing is that some of the progressive brothers support these kinds of things. So it's a very emotional thing for us women in terms of what's done. I just want to end on a positive note before we get into questions by saying that I've always been very complimentary to the TML, the Trinidad Muslim League. I started working here as a young woman, and I was embraced in this organization. And the TML has always had, from its inception, women in its council, which is the highest body, the decision-making body. Women have been integrated in decision-making and policy, and have been involved in every activity. While there is a separate ladies group as well that Sister Sabrina heads, there is that integration and space for women. So there are other spaces. I know the IRS, the IDM has been making efforts and so forth. So we need to be able to really push for some more of that. So I'll pause now, and I'm sure you have some burning questions for our panelists. So if you can probably take a mic. Is there a roving mic around? Asim Riza. Just identify yourself and your country. Okay, we have one of our sisters from Grenada, is it? Martinique, okay. Our sister from Martinique is leaving. She's one of our delegates and wanted to say a few words, so we'll give her the opportunity.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to thank the organizer of this convention, this meeting, and to thank everybody, and particularly the women here, because somehow I felt a strong link with them, because I have lived and I'm still living the same thing as they did. When Nafisa talked about the mosque, I really felt as if I was there. Because I know the problem, yes. Okay, so thank you everybody for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Touch, yeah?
Yes.
Three touch.
Yes. I have to kiss it.
Yes.
Sister.
Okay, so we had a question. So we'll take about 3 questions and then have the panelists respond. Okay, Miss Sami, Miss Lam, yeah? Take, right on the questions, right? So we can, yeah. All right, take care.
Thank you very much.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Barbados, yes. We're not hearing you clearly. Yeah, in Barbados, they do not permit women in the masjid.
some women are asking for space in the masjid. It is a significant number of women who believe that they should not go to the masjid, so that mothers is actually being minors. There is a new masjid that is being built, a petition was launched, and that has met with significant resistance. I think that the matter needs to be dealt with more at the level of the women, plus the level of the scholars, because they have responded with the interpretation from their scholars that they see it that it's better for the women to pray at home. They leave out the first part of the hadith to not prevent the women from praying.
Exactly.
So it is a concern for the sisters and Barbados, and I suspect it's a matter that will go a little further. There are these sisters that have created a petition and have brought that up. I would like to get some of your documents, Sister Lisa. I am happy that you did a presentation today and talking about engaging spaces, and it's important that our sisters be part of the process.
Thank you, Brother Sulaiman. I've just been given a note that I just have 3 more minutes, but it's not only an issue for Barbadians, but as a tourist going there as well. We've gone to the mosque several times to pray, only to realize women are not allowed. And therefore, if those who don't wish to go to the masjid, my advice would be, okay, you're free to stay home, but those who wish to go, don't prevent them from going to the masjid. And the masjid is more than a place to pray. It is really the hub for the community and the society. And just a quick example from Malaysia. I remember going to Malaysia and it was Friday, the day of Jummah. And the sisters saying, no, sisters don't go to pray. We don't go to Jummah. But do you know where they go? They go to the mall. During Jummah time, the malls are open. And they have malls, of course, found very amazing malls. And the sisters go to the mall. They say, So I think we have to really, look at that. But it's also an issue for the tourists. And if you have tourists who are coming to Barbados who, would want to go to the masjid, most of the time you go to a country, one of the first places we visit is a mosque. We look for the masjid, especially if it's on a Friday, to be able to see. Brother? Wa alaikum assalam.
It's more cultural than it doesn't belong in Islam. So also Allah when you constructed the first masjid, clearly Babu Nisa, the door is there for the sisters. So we have to understand that we have to start separating culture from the spiritual inner law.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for that comment. And the last question.
That's more something I want to add. Thank you, sisters. The fact is, I totally agree, but the danger lies here that we as Muslims know what is the truth. But if some things like these things which are said comes to people from another faith, they will think that Islam is something like that. So it is very important that the true message of Islam, dawah, being spread in the correct way. And as we have said, we cannot make things what Allah has made halal. This is something should not be done. I hope inshallah that other faith know what is the true Islam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jazakallah khairan. Just a quick, short response. Nafisa, short.
Yes, very short. Brother Suleiman, I knew him as a very young...
Put it on. It's probably off.
Yes. I know Brother Suleiman for some years now, and having studied law in Cave Hill, Barbados, in fact, one of the apartments I used to occupy is now being used as a worship for the brothers. And it was very painful when even for Eid you are unable to go to the masjid. And I'm very heartened to know that at least the awareness is being aroused now, and discussions are taking place, and sooner or later the issue will be resolved. It's a cultural thing, and I think when you look at the evolution of the Muslim community in Barbados, one would understand, because some of the teachings here were actually part and parcel of the big community here in Barbados.
Thank you. Anybody wants to say anything else quickly? No? Okay. Just a final point in terms of that last issue about the message and the wrong impression and misconception and perception of Islam. I was at the IMF or World Bank, and it's the same thing. There isn't space for women to pray. So you have a lot of, men going to pray, and I was asking my lecturer, I think at once, to go to pray on the Friday. It's like, women go to mosque? Are women allowed to go to mosque? I said, yes, certainly, and I'm going. So I think that message of, in terms of the dawah and the incorrect positions and the misconceptions have to be treated with. So there's a lot of work to do. I think we are seeing a new generation, and I'm very, very pleased that there are younger people who are now, we can pass on the baton to, and hold their hands a little bit and guide towards progress. So I want to thank you. I ask that Allah continues to guide and bless us all. Ameen. Salam alaikum. Salam.
Takbir. Takbir. Alhamdulillah. I think the message has gotten through. Alhamdulillah.
Quick learners.
Okay, inshallah. So, inshallah, we have gone into our break, but I think it was worth it. So inshallah, now we're going to have a 10-minute break for refreshments, and then we will resume inshallah.